name is John Christensen. I'm the director of the Copenhagen Climate Center, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the webinar about what we call GACMO 2.0 for enhanced climate action in collaboration with the ICAT initiative and my good friend Henning Wuester, who will introduce this in a second. And I think just for sort of household purposes, there's a lot of attendance. We have hundreds of participants. So at the end, there will be a Q&A session. We cannot deal with all questions, obviously, but we will collect them, and we will also share the presentations that come during the 1 hour that we have. For questions, there is an icon on your screen. You press the question mark and you can post questions there as we go along. The webinar will also be recorded and shared with you afterwards. So without further ado, I'll just basically pass it on to my good friend Henning Wuester, who's the director of the Initiative for Climate Action, ICAT, and he'll tell you something about the ICAT program and also the work we've been doing together around GACMO and so on. So over to you, Henning.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you very much, John. Very good to see you, and thanks for the nice introduction. Very happy to see so many join this webinar. I see the numbers are still rising, so more are coming in, which is really excellent. This year, countries have a major deadline to meet. The first BTR is due at the end of the year, and even more important, countries have to advance on their NDCs, assess progress and report on it in the BTR, and then plan for updates, which is due next year. Transparency is really central to all of that, and ICAT's toolbox can help you with a lot of the tasks that are due. So I'm very pleased that we are launching a new version of one of the most popular elements that we are linking to from the ICAT toolbox. The ICAT toolbox has a set of practical guides, methodologies, and tools to help you support policymakers in your countries in order to advance on climate action and on the transparency requirements that come with that. It, for instance, includes very centrally a series of guides to support policy assessment, and then tools for modeling, and tools to assist NDC implementation, evaluation, and tracking. As I said, GACMO is one of these tools and widely used across the ICAT family of countries that we are working with. It has been developed by UNEP CCC, and with the support of ICAT now, they have enhanced the tool with some additional features and functionalities that they will present to you today. But let me focus on what this tool is actually needed for. The global stocktake last year told us that the Paris Agreement is not on track to meet its objectives. We are not on track towards the 1.5-degree targets objective, and even 2.0 is still not guaranteed. So all parties need to strengthen their contributions, their NDCs. And in order to do that in a coherent way, countries need to adopt a forward-looking perspective. Most countries have looked at emission inventories, still with some potential for improvements, but very few have really taken a forward-looking perspective, and only if that is done, if you look at emission projections, it is possible to include mitigation actions in the NDCs that are actually appropriate for national circumstances. So this needs a good understanding of options and a quantitative framework across all sectors, and GACMO is the tool that can help you with this. It allows to base mitigation planning on a solid foundation based on data across the whole economy. GACMO allows rapid but a comprehensive evaluation of greenhouse gas impacts of mitigation actions from all relevant sectors. And it allows to assess their costs. So it can help to calculate emissions for a business as usual scenario, and then estimate greenhouse gas impacts of mitigation actions and estimate their costs. This information can be used when designing NDCs in the context of updating NDCs. GACMO can be used as a tracking tool for emission reduction targets in the NDCs. It can also help to assess climate finance needs on mitigation. And all of that, of course, will then help to report data and develop strong BTRs, which is one of the tasks that is due this year. GACMO is relatively easy to use. Its major advantage is that countries can get started even with relatively little data. GACMO has default values that are preloaded, which allows countries to get started, but then countries can add their own data and their own values to refine the assessment step by step. This updated version of GACMO has made it easier for countries to independently use the tool. It is much more intuitive and also includes more guidance to support users at every step on the way. And it provides more attractive ways to present results, tables and graphs. So my appeal to you, use it. Use it to inform decision makers, use it to engage stakeholders from various sectors, use it to strengthen your NDCs, both in terms of design and implementation. And one final good feature to highlight, you can also apply for ICAT support in setting up GACMO in your countries. So a big thank you to the team at UNEP CCC, especially Denis, for the development of this enhanced version of GACMO. And thank you all for attending. Back to you, John.
Yeah, thank you very much, Henning, for sort of both framing the sort of political context and also how the model fits in and the engagement with ICAT and so on. There's lots more story to tell. And I think behind you is also the website for the ICAT program. So, I mean, people can go and check out all the other features and yeah.
On this side.
Actually, the other one, it doesn't matter. Good. So I think that's a good place. There are lots of other guidance and other material under the ICAT program that complements the modeling efforts. So before we move on to hearing about the model from Denis, we will hear a little bit about how it fits into the UNEP broader context on transparency. And I'm happy to have my also long-term colleague here at the center and now head of the Unit of Global Climate Action in UNEP and actually some of the UNEP liaison here. Miriam Hinostroza is coming on from Paris to give us a little bit of sort of how does this fit into the UNEP context.
Thank you very much, John, for that introduction, and also Henning for saying already a lot about our webinar today and the GACMO model. Greetings, esteemed participants. I've heard that we have a good number, so whenever it's morning, afternoon, or evening for you, hello to everybody. I'm glad to extend my warm welcome to all of you, and obviously I'm honored to be part of this webinar, and I express my gratitude to the colleagues at the UNEP CCC for orchestrating this event and inviting me to share a few thoughts. So as Henning rightly said, this webinar is convened at a pivotal juncture, considering the significance and complexity of this year for all parties to the Climate Change Convention. You've heard that in December 2024, countries are tasked with submitting their inaugural first transparency reports, followed by the submission of their next cycle nationally determined contributions, and already by February 2025. So again, this backdrop, it is imperative for all, I think, multilateral agencies and international cooperation entities to collaborate closely and offer comprehensive technical and financial assistance to countries. This collective effort should be obviously conducive to support all of you countries in meeting your obligations and ensuring the timely and effective delivery of both the first VTRs and the subsequent NDCs. As you know, these processes align with the Paris Agreement's imperative to maintain climate ambition at 1.5 degrees Celsius and strengthen reporting obligations with enhancing rigor and transparency. So tools like GACMO are very much needed to illuminate this process. Elevating ambition comes obviously or depends on precise data. Achieving accurate data requires countries to streamline and institutionalize robust processes for measuring, for monitoring, for validating this data, and for reporting. So this data forms the bedrock for comprehensive reports and policy making, both on a national and a global scale. The effectiveness of global policies and implementation action especially rests on transparent systems that can credibly assess and report their impacts. Nationally, transparency plays a pivotal role in cultivating trust in the multilateral climate regime, with credible data and reporting shedding light on outcomes, whether successful or not. So we have to report successful or not successful results coming from efforts in the countries. UNEP and UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center are committed to supporting climate transparency and accountability, and this is done through establishing and operationalizing transparency and monitoring frameworks. This is something that not only UNEP or UNEP CCC does, but we are also doing this through ICAT and other initiatives the same way, but countries still need to go some miles forward in order to have these frameworks implemented. Enhancing the quality and reliability of climate-related data. We always say that everything depends on data, on the numbers, and those numbers need to be really worked on in countries with processes and accurate measuring protocols, etc. Developing metrics, data sets, and tools for improved tracking and assessment of climate results, as exemplified by GACMO, as you will hear from in a few minutes from Denis. So UNEP also implements through UNEP CCC a program called the CBAT Global Support Program, which encompasses 10 different transparency networks through which support is provided to countries. These 10 networks each have dedicated space on the Climate Transparency Platform, which is a one-stop shop related to the Enhanced Transparency Framework of the Paris Agreement and continued supporting under the UNEP CCC. It's a very resourceful platform, so I invite all of you to visit the website of the platform. It's a Climate Transparency Platform. So the CBAT Global Support Program also offers various other support to countries, such as the quality review of countries' transparency reports, the provision of a dedicated gender toolkit, and this is still forthcoming, and so the teams are working very hard on it. Global meetings, actually the first one on this phase happening in May in Japan. Webinars and like this, and knowledge, number of other knowledge products. Now zooming in on the theme of the webinar, the GACMO. And GACMO is legacy of my good friend and mentor Jürgen Fengen, who is now enjoying hopefully his retirement, and was inherited by not only Denis but other colleagues, but supported also by ICAT to continuously work on innovating it. So as Henning said, this is a greenhouse gas projections tool that has been updated and refined by the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center over 2 decades. That's why I'm mentioning Jürgen. He studied this, equipping countries with a tool for navigating the complexities of emission reductions and chart future emission pathways and a number of other things that Henning mentioned. So this new version has been developed with the support of the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency, as Henning rightly noted. So this model has been an instrumental tool in enabling countries to conduct a rapid yet precise scenario analysis of how different mitigation options would impact greenhouse gases emissions, for example. This also provides valuable input for preparing and updating NDCs by identifying NDC targets for emission reductions and by providing assessments of future emissions in different climate scenarios. So it's a very timely tool being launched in a timely manner. It's the momentum for you really to explore the tool, because this can also be used to support the preparation of national climate plans, long-term plan strategies, etc. All these that Henning has already mentioned. So in UNEP, we are very committed to support countries to meet their reporting obligations. Currently, we are supporting around 100 countries with preparing national communications, VORs, and BTRs. In 2023, 3 national communications were submitted with support from UNEP, 9 biannual update reports to the Secretariat with support from UNEP. So at the same time, UNEP has secured around $40 million to help from the GF to help more than 50 countries develop their first biannual transparency reports. So so far, UNEP and UNEP CCC have provided training and to a number of countries, and during the course of 2024, we'll continue providing more training and support. Just to give you some figures and examples, 9 transparency regional networks were launched to facilitate collaboration and peer learning among countries with similar characteristics. 72 direct technical support were provided in 2023. Tailored assistance was provided based on countries' specific support requests, covering various topics, including BTR, roadmap development, GHG inventory training, modeling tool trainings, NDC indicators development, training on national inventory, report preparation on national inventory systems, etc. 12 in-person hands-on trainings around the globe have been conducted last year, where countries on NDC data was utilized. 13 technical webinars and virtual workshops also were organized, 16 experience sharing webinars for South-South exchange and peer learning activities. The team has also conducted 20 reviews, including 2 peer reviews of transparency reports from primarily SEEDs and LDCs. The Climate Transparency Platform was launched also during SB's in Bonn last year. So all this fantastic work is being done by the team in the Copenhagen Climate Center, obviously in close coordination with experts in UNEP as well. So in conclusion, I trust that this webinar will equip countries with essential insights into the practical utility of GACMO as a methodological tool for conducting mitigation assessments while formulating their upcoming NDCs. So your questions and feedback are highly encouraged, as GACMO is a dynamically evolving tool that undergoes continuous innovation. Please feel free to reach out to the teams working with this, with your inquiries and insights, and also reach out to UNEP if you need any support. Thank you very much, and I hope that the webinar will be very useful for you.
Good. Thank you very much, Miriam, for framing this in the sort of broader context of transparency in UNEP. We will just go straight on to hearing more about the GACMO tool from Denis Desgain, who is the head of the Mitigation Analysis and Data Management section here at the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center. So, Denis, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks a lot, John. So thanks, Miriam and Henning. And so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the attendees on this webinar. So as it has been mentioned, 2024 and 2025 are important years for countries, for parties in the context of the UNEP CCC. So in 2024, countries are required to submit their first BTR, Biennial Transparency Report. And in 2025, countries are requested to submit their updated or a new NDC. The presentation that I will do today will introduce you to the GACMO tool, and my presentation will also try to explain how this tool can be useful for NDC preparation, NDC reporting, NDC tracking, and preparation of BTR. The presentation includes three main parts. The first part will explain very quickly what is GACMO, how it can be used and what it can be used for. The second part will explain also briefly the methodological approach applied in using GACMO. And the third part will come back to how the GACMO tool can be used for NDC preparation and BTR preparation. So where the name GACMO comes from? Well, the name GACMO is an acronym for Greenhouse Gas Abatement Cost Model. The GACMO tool is an Excel-based modeling tool for greenhouse gas emission projections. The methodologies included into the tools are based on the IPCC methodologies, and the calculations of the GHG emissions are based usually on the CDM methodologies. So it means that the GACMO tool is in line with the international requirement related to GHG emission estimations and projections. As it has been mentioned, so the tool, the GACMO tool, has been developed at the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center over the past 20 years. So it's a tool which has evolved over the years. And the tool can be downloaded for free on our website using the link that you can see now on your screen. So any user can download the tool, install the tool on his or her own computer, and once it is installed on the computer, you can use the GACMO tool offline, so you do not require an internet connection to use the tool. So as I have mentioned, the tool has been developed over the past 20 years. So why to do, you will ask me, this webinar today? So it has been mentioned, it is because today we are launching a new version of the GACMO tool. This new version has been developed and finalized in 2023 with the support of the ICAT, so the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency. What are the main differences between this new version and the old version? Well, first of all, you have to know that the methodologies and the approach in the new version of the tool are similar to the ones included in the old version. So it means that any user who is or was familiar with the old version of the tool will have no problems to take, of course, the new version into his or her hands. The main differences between the new and the old version of the tool are related to the user interface. So in the new version of the tool, the user interface has been improved, so the tool is more user-friendly. The new version of the tool proposes also a stepwise approach. It means that the user now is driven into the tool following specific steps corresponding to a specific sheet. So it means that the use of the new tool is much more intuitive and rational, I would say, than the old version. In the new version, the user also needs to navigate by clicking on different buttons. And the new version comes with a step-by-step detailed guidance, which provides explanation to the user on how to use each step, each sheet of the GACMO tool, and together with two videos, which are also available on our website. In the new version of the tool also, all the results of the GACMO tool are now put together on one sheet, which is called actually the result sheet. And those results are shown, presented into tables and also into figures and graphics, which have also been improved. So now to come back to the use of the GACMO tool. So what this tool can be used for. First of all, the GACMO tool allows a user to build a business as usual scenario of greenhouse gas emission, which is made, as you will see later in my presentation, by projecting the GHG emission of a start year towards future year, so namely 25, 30, 35, and 50. The GACMO tool allows also a user to build mitigation scenarios, which are expressed as percentage reduction in the GHG emission compared to the business as usual scenario, also in the years 25, 30, 35, and 50. So in this case, as you will see, so the GACMO tool is useful in the context of NDC development of update. So in the new version, in the version of the GACMO tool, a user can also assess the expected and achieved emission reduction related to a specific mitigation options. Okay, and as you will see later in my presentation, it can be in this sense useful in the context of NDC reporting and NDC tracking. The GACMO tool provides also the user with information on the cost related to a specific mitigation option compared to reference options used in the baseline. So overall, the GACMO tool allows a user to get an overview of the total mitigation efforts. For example, it can be mitigation efforts taken by a country in the context of its NDC, expressed as total GHG reduction and expressed also as total cost, investment cost, and operational cost related to a specific set of mitigation options. So to use the GACMO tool, like any other tools, any other models, the user needs, of course, to integrate into the tool inputs data. The main inputs data required for running the GACMO tool are, first of all, the energy balance of the country corresponding to the start year. Then the second input data are the values of the GHG emissions for the non-energy sector, which, for example, can be found in the national greenhouse gas inventory of the country. Finally, as you will see, a third group of important inputs data are the growth factors expressed which are the annual change expressed in percentage of sector or subsectors towards the year 25, 30, 35, and 50. So I will come back on those concepts while explaining how the GACMO tool works. Finally, to build the mitigation scenario, of course, the user, as you will see, will need to include some inputs data related to a specific mitigation options. As of today, the GACMO tool has been used in a different context. Some countries have used the tools in the context of the national communication, NDC, BUR, also in the context of long-term strategy. But as of today, so the tool is mostly used by countries, of course, in the context of their NDC and BTR. So now what is the methodological approach applied in the GACMO tool? Well, first of all, in the new version of the GACMO tool, the tool is divided into 9 main steps corresponding to 9 Excel sheets. In the first step, the user will need to introduce the input data to prepare the information on the start year and build the business as usual scenario. In the step 5 and in the step 6, the user can then visualize the results of the business as usual scenario. The step 7, as you will see, is the step which is used to build the mitigation scenario. The step 8 is the step where the user can visualize all the results, the outputs of the use of the GACMO tool. And finally, the step 9 in the new version correspond to a special sheet, which is called the tracking sheet, and can be used by a user to monitor the progress in implementing specific mitigation options and monitoring the achievement of related GHG targets. So it's a special sheet which is usually or used exposed by a user. So now, what is first of all the approach to build the business as usual scenario in the GACMO tool? Well, first of all, in the step 1, as I have mentioned, the user will need to introduce some data related to the country. For example, we have the currency of the country, the energy prices of primary fuel, the fuel prices of secondary fuels, but also data like the grid emission factor of the country or the emission factor of the different fossil fuels used in the mix of the energy mix of the country. Then at the second step, the user will need to introduce the energy balance of the country corresponding to the selected start year by the user. Then in the third sheet, the user will have to introduce the values of the GHG emissions from the non-energy sector, taken, for example, from the last GHG inventory of the country. Finally, in the fourth sheet, the user will have to introduce the growth rates, so these growth factors corresponding to the growth factors of the different sectors and subsectors towards different future year. Then what is happening? So based on the energy balance introduced in the GACMO tool, the GACMO tool will convert using the energy balance of the country, using the emissions factors of the different fossil fuels. The GACMO tool will convert the energy balance into a GHG balance of the country for the start year. Then adding up the value of this GHG balance to the values of the GHG emissions from the non-energy sector, the GACMO tool calculates the total GHG emissions for the start year of the country. Then, using the growth factor, the GACMO tool will automatically project the GHG emission of the start year towards the year 25, 30, 35, and 50. And this way, so the user will get 5 points corresponding to the emissions in the start year in 25, 30, 35, and 50. And by joining these points, the GACMO tool built the business as usual scenario. As I have mentioned, the results of these projections for the business as usual scenario can be visualized by the user in the step 5 and the step 6, where the user will find the table with all the data corresponding to the projected energy balance and GHG balance for the different years. So this is the way that the GACMO tool built the business as usual scenario. So what about the mitigation scenario? So, well, the GACMO tool is what is called also a bottom-up modeling tool. And you will see it is because the mitigation scenario is built using specific mitigation options, which can be implemented basically on the ground. So what is the way that it works? So first of all, you have to know that the GACMO tool includes today 119 mitigation options, which are pre-integrated into the tool and covering the different sectors and subsectors as defined in the IPCC. So energy, including transport, but forestry, also agriculture, forestry, waste, IPCC, and so on. So then the rationale is the following. A user will have to look at the 119 mitigation options and select the mitigation options which are relevant in the context of his or her own country. And then for each of these mitigation options, the user will have to assess the number of units penetrating in the future year. So here, for example, it can be 2030. So just a quick example to be maybe more clear. So if a country is planning to replace CFL fluorescent bulbs by a LEDs bulb, and that by 2030, the country is planning to do this replacement for 10 million bulbs. Then the user will have to introduce the number 10 millions here in this sheet in the yellow column for the options, so the efficient lighting with LEDs replacing CFL's bulbs. And by doing so, the GACMO tool will automatically calculate the emission reduction achieved in 2030, in this case, in relation to the replacement of the 10 million bulbs. In addition, the GACMO tool will also provide information in terms of cost, investment cost, and annual operational cost related to the implementation of these specific mitigation options compared to the reference option. Then, of course, the GACMO tool will calculate the emission reduction related to each of the specific mitigation options selected by the user. The GACMO tool will aggregate so all the emission reduction to calculate a total emission reduction in the years 25, 30, 35, and 50. And then by deducing this reduction to the emission level calculated for those same years in the business as usual scenario, the GACMO tool built the emission mitigation scenario. Okay? So this is the rationale for building the mitigation scenario. So as I have mentioned, all the results of the application of the tools can be found, visualized in a specific sheet at the step 8 in the new version of the tool. Those results are presented as tables where all the results of the calculation are shown as values, of course, and also in terms as a curve, as graphics on the same sheet. So here it is, for example, a real example taken from the NDC submitted by Laos to the UNEP CCC, where you see the country has built a business as usual scenario and 2 mitigation scenarios using the GACMO tool. Here you have also an example of curves, in this case for the business as usual scenario. And in this case, you see that the curves correspond to a disaggregation at the sectorial or subsector level, as all these curves can be built by the GACMO tool as a national economy-wide scenario, but also as a sectorial scenario. Finally, as also a key outputs of the GACMO tool, we have the marginal abatement revenue curve, okay, which is usually considered as a key outputs of the tool. So without going into the details, so this type of curves correspond to an inverted, so to speak, a MAC curve, so the famous MAC curve. And this type of graphics can be used by a user to visualize very quickly what are the win-win, so to speak, mitigation options. So meaning, of course, mitigation options allowing emission reduction, of course, as they are mitigation options, but also allowing these reductions by through savings compared to the reference options. Finally, these graphs also allows the user to compare the different options in terms of cost effectiveness to reduce a certain amount of GHG emissions. So to finalize the description of the different steps, we have then the last step, the step 9, as I have mentioned, which is a special step, so to speak, as it is usually used exposed by the user. And in this step, the user can monitor the implementation of specific mitigation options and also follow the progress in achieving specific GHG emission target related to those mitigation options or related to a set of mitigation options. So to finalize my presentation, so I will briefly come back to how the tool can be useful in the context of NDC planning, NDC tracking, and BTR preparation. So I hope that with the previous slides that I have explained, I hope that it is clear now that the GACMO tool can be useful and can be used by a user to build a business as usual and mitigation scenario towards a future year, by projecting GHG emission towards a future year. So in this sense, the GACMO tool can be used in the context of an NDC update, NDC preparation, to establish GHG emission targets. And this can be done as the national level, as economy-wide GHG emission target, but also at the sectorial level as a sectorial GHG emission target. In addition, as I have mentioned, the tool allows a user to assess the expected and achieved emission reduction from mitigation, from specific mitigation options, and allow the user to track the progress in achieving the specific emission targets defined previously. So in this sense, as I have mentioned, the GACMO tool can be used also as a tracking tool, an NDC tracking tool. Finally, the GACMO tool can also be useful to support you for the reporting phase of the NDC, so namely for the BTR preparation. So as you may know, as part of the BTR, the countries need to prepare different tables, which are called the Common Tabular Format table, so the famous CTF tables. And the tool can be useful to fill in the information in different of those tables. First of all, it can be useful for the table CTF1. As you know, so countries need to define indicators to track the progress in implementing and achieving their NDCs. And like I have explained previously, the GACMO tool can establish GHG emission targets, but can be used also as GHG emission indicators, so that the tool can be useful to fill in the CTF1 and also the related CTF2. The tool can also be useful to fill in the CTF table 4, where the user needs to report the values over time of the indicators defined previously. And by allowing a user to, of course, assessing the GHG emission impacts of a specific mitigation option and calculating, of course, the progress in achieving target, the tool can be useful to fill in the CTF4. Finally, the tool can also be useful to fill in the CTF table 5. As you may know, the countries now are requested as much as possible to assess the expected and achieved emission reduction related to the implementation to specific policies, measures, and actions and plan that the countries is considering for achieving the NDC target. And by allowing the user to assess, to estimate, to calculate this expected and achieved GHG emission reduction related to specific mitigation options, the tool is definitively useful to fill in the table 5. Finally, and this is the last slide, countries in their BTR, in the CTF table 7, 8, 9, are also to provide information, data related to the GHG emission projections in 3 different scenarios. So the with measure scenario, which is a requirement, and the with additional measures and with measures, which are scenarios encouraged by the UNFCCC decisions. So as you have seen, of course, as the GACMO tool is a GHG emissions projections tools, it can, of course, be used to build one or those 3 type of scenarios. So in conclusion, as you have seen, I hope, the GACMO tool is a simple tool which is easily adaptable to a specific national context. The GACMO tool is also a transparent tool in the sense that all the calculation, all the formula all the default data which are included into the tool can be seen by a user, so that the user can really see what is happening and how the calculations are made into the tool. The GACMO tool, as we have mentioned, can be useful to prepare NDC by establishing GHG emission target, by building business as usual and mitigation scenarios, and by calculating GHG emissions reductions related to specific mitigation options. Finally, the tool can be useful to in the context of NDC tracking and in the context of the preparation of the BTR by tracking progress in implementing specific mitigation options and tracking the achievement of related GHG emission targets. And also, as I have just explained, by filling in the famous CTF tables included in the BTR. So I'm finishing now my presentations. I would like to thank all the participants for your time today. I also want, of course, to thank again the ICAT initiative for giving us the opportunity in developing the new version of the tool. And also would like to thank my two colleagues, so Jakob and Amgul, who have also been part of the team so working on the development of this new version. So thanks a lot, and back to you, John.
Yeah, thanks, Denis, for what I would call a comprehensive appetizer. I mean, it's quite a detailed run through, but at the same time, I'd encourage people to really go and download the model, as you said, and try it out, because this gives them a real feeling for what it is, but I'm sure you need to sit and play with it to really make it happen. I think just to move on, I can see already now we're going to be a little bit short on time for the question and answer. So I hope if people stay online, and we have still about 200 people online. So let's see if people start dropping off around 2 p.m. CET, then we will close down. But I have a group of questions to come back to. But before that, we have a short presentation by Kamil Salazar from Belize, who's a climate change officer and the Minister of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management. It's a pre-recorded video because it's really early in Belize. So I hope that one will come on in a minute or a second for that matter.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kamil Salazar. I'm the Climate Change MRV Officer within the National Climate Change Office in Belize. I was invited to give a brief presentation on the GACMO tool. And luckily for us, actually, we recently had an in-country, in-person training for the GACMO tool with some of our sector leads and key stakeholders that are usually involved in our data collection and reporting processes for climate change. So to start with, the training was a great opportunity for us, and it made us identify some challenges that we can use the tool to address. This includes determining how on track we are with our NDC and how we can use those results to plan for the next update cycle. The tool is also able to help us determine the cost of various mitigation actions that we have set forth within our NDC. So it gives us an idea of the amount of funds that we would need to implement some of the actions that we've promised to implement. And then the tool also gives an overview of our total mitigation effort, including the GHG reduction that we may have, the total investments that would be included, and the total annual cost. One of the things that we've learned and really liked is that it can be used for the BTR, especially since the tool can be used for multiple sectors and it's not isolated to just one sector. So I mentioned that we had the training in Belize just 2 weeks ago, actually. So as the National Climate Change Office, we're responsible for the overall reporting for climate change for the country and also internationally. We prepared the national communications, Biennial Transparency Reports, and so on to the UNFCCC. And so we had invited our stakeholders, key stakeholders and sector leads that are usually involved in these processes with us. And some reflections that they provided us from the tool was that they see various benefits, including how it's useful for projecting costs and that it can assist in identifying investment needs and generating specific amounts and approximations that are needed to implement certain actions. They also mentioned that the tool provides good results in seeing what are the impacts of the actions that we're implementing, and that also it's beneficial for long-term planning, including NDC tracking and assessing NDC targets, and also that it's useful when it's time for the next update cycle of the NDC. Something else that was echoed across the room by the stakeholders was that they realized that good quality data is needed, and this is important to get the best accurate results, especially for the country, using country-specific information. And so it made them look at how they're collecting data and information right now and how they can improve upon that. And something else that they really liked about the tool and they shared with us was that it allowed for harmonization among sectors, since the tool isn't isolated to just one sector and it's the same methodology being used across the board. So that's something that we really liked about the tool as well. So we've been discussing the different ways of how we can use the GACMO tool. It's come up in conversation about possibly using it during the update of our NDC, as well as the development of our first BTR. We're all aware that that's due in December 2024. And given the time that we have left, it's something that we could use possibly in-house, doing those projections on our own. Another thing that came up as well during the training, actually, from the stakeholders, I mentioned that we're responsible for the overall reporting at the national level, but the stakeholders mentioned that they see the benefits of using the tool at their department level, unit level. It's for their own policy planning and decision making, getting projections of costs and what are the impacts of some of their own actions that they want to implement, despite the overall reporting for Belize, but just what to accomplish their department mission and vision. So that's something we were very happy to hear as well. And with that, I thank you, and I just want to say that I hope everyone gets an opportunity to use the tool. I highly encourage it. Another good thing about the tool that I didn't mention is that it's free, so it can be downloaded from UNEP's website. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of it and see how best you can use it to benefit your reporting, whether it's a national level or sectoral level, whether you're using it for all sectors or just one sector, but it's a really good tool. So thank you.
Good. That was the presentation from Kamil. I don't know if she has come up early and is online, but thank you very much for the input to this and also sharing the experiences. And I can recognize a lot of the recommendations. I mean, no tool is better than the data you put into it. So, I mean, that's clearly a learning that you find out very quickly. I think we have about 5 minutes, but I'll take a little longer and see how long people stay on for the Q&A. I have a number of questions coming in from the audience. And if I can ask both Denis and Henning to put their video on, then we can sort of make it a little more interactive. I'll put my own on also. Yes, so there are sort of two groups of questions, some that are more technical and some that are more sort of for Henning and for the initiative as such. So I think if we start with you, Henning, then maybe I'll group them a little bit. Is sort of around how can countries join ICAD? Is if you already have a CBIT project, can you still ask for support from ICAD? Is it possible to get sort of non-English, French, Spanish support? And maybe also in the same go in terms of what are some of the other tools and guidance that the initiative provides? And just bear in mind, Henning, we have a few minutes, so brief but comprehensive or whatever.
Yeah, so thank you. I didn't hope I caught all the questions, and I'll be very short in responding. To join the initiative, we need a formal request, but so the best thing is first of all to contact us informally, and then we can discuss, and then we need at some stage a formal request, a formal letter from from a government entity that has some role on climate action transparency. So it can also be a sectoral ministry, and then we can engage with them. Now, when CBIT project is ongoing, we usually are not very happy to engage, especially when it's a small country, because we have seen that small countries do not have the capacity to run two projects in parallel, a CBIT project and an ICAT project. If it's a big country, that is much more feasible, and but what we always try to do is to make sure that we coordinate the content of ICAT and CBIT projects. Now, talking about the toolbox would really take quite a lot of time, but what I want to encourage as complementary to the GACMO tool are the policy assessment guides, because I think GACMO is a great tool to get started, to go beyond just shooting in the dark and haphazardly identifying some mitigation options. But of course, when you have selected a mitigation option, you need to go much further into detail, and then you can look at some of the ICAT policy assessment guides, which exist, for instance, for renewable energy, for agriculture and other sectors, and there you can go much further into detail. We encourage also an assessment of development impacts of mitigation options, and that's quite critical, because only once you understand how mitigation impacts your economy can it become real and implementation can actually move forward. So this is, in a very short way, a response. We do have some of the guides also and material available in Spanish. We are working on a Russian version of some of them, and we are also planning French versions of tools, and support, ICAT support, can be provided in other languages, so that is an option.
Yeah, thanks, Henning. I have one more question, which in principle goes for both of you, but I'll state it now, and then maybe you can just touch on it, Henning, and then I'll go over to Denis with some further more technical questions. There's a question from a colleague from an NGO in Malawi, who's a leading think tank working on climate policy, saying, can the tool be used independent of government climate policy? Is there any support in this context for non-state actors working on climate policy? Which is a good question, I think, that we have touched upon earlier. And of course, there's also the non-state actor guidance and so on. So maybe if you go first, Henning, and then I'll give Denis a couple of more technical questions also afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, ICAT does support projects that are focused on the engagement of non-state actors and subnationals. So in that sense, of course, we have also had examples where GACMO was actually broken down to the municipal level and then applied to assess mitigation options of cities. So that can be done, and it can be supported in the context of a national ICAT project. We are also currently looking, we had a call out for non-governmental entities to propose projects on transparency, and so that was another way which we are just in the process of evaluating, where another way of engaging non-governmental entities in doing transparency assessments. And of course, that could also be done using GACMO and the series of policy assessment guides that I've already mentioned before.
Good. Thank you, Henning. And now I'll turn to you, Denis. And you can think a little bit about this question, because anybody can, of course, use the tool. But some of the other ones are more technical. I'll just take a couple of them because there are sort of quite a number. And I mean, something about how accurate are the mitigation costs in GACMO? Can the user modify the cost and mitigation data with country data? And can it be used for one IPCC sector only? And also linked to that, when you talk about sectors, is it IPCC 2006 inventory guidance, or is it newer? So a little bit about sort of how it works.
Yes, thanks, John. Maybe, so if I go, yes. So if I start from the first one, I think that, so to reply about also the non-state actor, I think you wanted maybe me to start with this one. So typically, just to mention, so the GACMO tool is typically normally used by government stakeholder. So it can be used by national, I would say, government entities, but it can be also used at the subnational level. So in this sense, as I have mentioned, for example, if it's in the context of an NDC, usually it will be used at the national level, but eventually, if it's to be used in the context of a plan at a subnational level, so as I mentioned, so the tool can be used by a subnational level. Of course, the mitigation options which are included in the tool are, I would say, in the reality, implemented by different type of stakeholders, including a private sector, of course. Okay. Now related to the first question on how accurate are the costs. So I would say the GACMO tool provides a first estimation of the investment cost and operational cost of specific mitigation options compared to reference options. So we always say that be aware that the GACMO tool is not an investment tool. So it really provides a first assessment to have an idea of how the costs are impacted when you compare, I repeat, the mitigation options compared to the reference options. All the calculation in relation to the cost and the second question, so all the calculations in the tool are made, of course, based on data. When you download the GACMO tool on your computer, many of those data have or parameter includes default values. So if you are really in a context where you do not have any data, or if you are missing part of those data, you can use the default values inserted into the GACMO tool. But as I have mentioned, so it's possible for your user to access all the default values which are provided into the tool. And of course, if a user has available country-specific data, it can, and it's actually recommended, of course, it can replace the default data, the default values by country-specific values. And of course, by doing so, you increase the accuracy of the results of the calculation. In relation with the IPCC, so as I said, overall, the GACMO tool is based on the IPCC methodologies. It follows the 2006 IPCC requirements. So by default, for example, the GWP of the gases are aligned by default to the last IPCC requirement. But again, it's possible for your user to access all these parameters and eventually adjust this parameter if there is a good reason or a need to do so. In relation to the last questions, so if it can be used for one specific sector. So yes, so of course, so the GACMO tool covers the different sectors as defined by the IPCC. But of course, if you are interested only in analyzing or doing projections, let's say for the transport sector, so you can of course include the data, the inputs data related to the transport sector only, and you can analyze only the transport sector, or in the business as usual scenario. And of course, you can only refer to the mitigation options related then to the transport sector to analyze and build eventually a mitigation scenario only for the transport sector or for any other specific sectors. So I think I hope I have like this replied to the different questions so far.
I think it's fine, Dennis. I think we still have about 150 people online, so I think we'll take two final questions to you, Dennis. More technical ones, relatively short ones that just came in. One is the chance that data can be collected and used as proxy between countries, so you can basically share data. If you don't have it, can you use something from another country that is at least better than if you don't have anything? And the second one from a previous GACMO user saying it was a bit of a task to build the abatement curves. Has that been automated more, or is that something that has changed in the new model? I think that's the two last ones, then we're going to close down after that. And maybe the general question to everybody who's asked that all the recordings, all the presentations will be available on the websites as soon as they're finished. So that is sort of the basic message to everybody. And of course, I'll come back after you, Dennis, just to wrap up.
So related to the first question, so basically, in some way, it's up to the user to decide what type of data, so to speak, he or she wants to integrate into the tool. So of course, if you do not have data or you are missing data, so you can use, as I have mentioned, the default values which are already inserted into the tool. But if you believe that using similar data coming from a similar country context is better, you can do so. Okay, so it's an approach eventually to replace missing data. So an approach is, as you have mentioned, so using similar or at least values for those data coming from a similar country context. Regarding the question on the MAC curve, yes. So in the old version, it was actually, yes, quite challenging. It had become quite challenging to build the MAC curve. In general, the old version had become quite difficult or unintuitive to use. And it's because that it had evolved over the years without following a specific structure. It had become complicated, so to speak, to use. And this is why we decided to do this, to develop this new version with the support from ICAT. And in the new version, the way to build the MAC curve has, according to me, but been improved and is easier, of course, than in the old version. Maybe just a quick remark. If you are, so we have tested and used the tool, the new version of the tool already in a few countries. If you are using the tool in your own country or for any purpose that you might have, if you are facing some error or bugs, you are always welcome to contact us, of course, and we can help you to modify, to correct the errors or the bugs. The same if you have specific questions on the use of the tool itself, you are also welcome to contact us by email, and we will try as much as possible to reply to your questions. So I hope that it was clear, and we can, of course, follow up on the remaining questions in the coming days and weeks also.
Yeah, good. Thanks a lot, Denis. And I'm happy to hear that I haven't used the tool, so I won't sort of come in and compare, but I can imagine that it would be nice with a little more automated sort of curve development and so that sounds positive. I'm sure the whole tool has improved, of course, with the support Henning has provided also. Anyway, so let me wrap up quickly by saying thank you to the participants. We had about 200 people online. They're starting to fall off now, which is natural because we are running over time, and I'm sorry about that. It's difficult to keep time management when people are in different locations and you can't beat them on the head when they speak too long. But I think it's been a very useful exercise. I hope you will give it a try. Go and look at the tool, download it, and as Denis said, come back and ask questions. And if you find mistakes or things that need to be fixed, let them know that too. It has been tested quite extensively and already applied, as we heard from Kamil and others that have been involved in training recently and so on. So it should be there. It should be functional, of course. And yeah, with that, I want only just to thank Henning for supporting this and for taking the lead on the ICAT side, and for Denis for presenting. And Miriam has disappeared into another meeting in Paris, so I'll tell her when I see her next time. So thank you very much, and look out for the different things that come online in terms of what happened today and so on that you can download in a few days.